Radio 1. Just tell you a little bit about me first of all. So my day job is I produce Hugh Stevens' show on Radio 1. So we cover lots and lots of lovely new artists, and we cover also the best of BBC Introducing on Radio 1. So BBC Introducing, if you're not aware, it's a network of local shows around the country who all have access to the BBC Introducing uploader. People upload their music, and then this is how the system should work. They get played by their local shows. The local shows pass on the best of what they play to us, and also to BBC Introducing shows on Radio 2, on Radio 3, all different national networks. So we're the one for Radio 1. There's a picture of my team enjoying one of our favourite show props, a bit of cake. Also, I am a member of the Radio 1 playlist committee. So this is where we decide, as a committee, what gets played on Radio 1 daytime on the playlist. That's Chris Price. He runs the Radio 1 playlist committee as head of the music team. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what we look for from a specialist show perspective to start with. Because this is kind of where it starts, and I know a lot of you guys manage or are artists at sort of emerging level. So it's very simple, really. I kind of thought when I was writing this, like I'm kind of teaching grandma how to suck eggs, but I think it helps just to be really basic and lay it out. So first of all, is it any good? Like seriously, that's the first and probably the last thing we think of. Originality is a massive thing. If we hear something that's got something about it that's kind of makes you sit up and think, oh, I haven't heard this before. If you're mixing genres, if there's a sort of weird beat that we haven't heard, or elements of other things put together, we really appreciate that. It's really difficult to do, especially when there's so much music out there. So the other thing we look for is quality. Obviously, not everybody can reinvent the wheel, but if you're going to be an indie band, you've got to be a really good indie band. So there are plenty of them out there, so that's another thing we look for. Our role is partly to go out there and look for the bands, on their SoundClouds and all that kind of stuff, but also we have a job to sort of reflect what the new music community are talking about on the interwebs. So if we hear that there's a band that's getting a lot of talk up on the web, then we want to check out and see whether the hype's justified. We don't play everything that gets massive hype, because the other thing we have to think about is, will our audience like it? Obviously, our audience is absolutely who we're serving. And there are a few things that, while we can appreciate their excellent quality, or they might be really original, but if they don't really fit in with the mix of what we play on Radio 1 and what we know our audience go for, then we'll probably pass them on to another show, to be honest. So I'm thinking of things like, there might be a brand new country star who's on the rise, might be brilliant, but not really for Radio 1. And then finally, and importantly, does Hugh like it? I would never make Hugh play a song that he didn't personally love, because as soon as you make presenters do that, you can see straight through them. It doesn't matter so much on daytime, because we all know that on daytime it's a playlist, so they haven't picked every record. But for a show like this, where his name's on the door and it's meant to be about sort of representing his brand, he absolutely has to co-sign everything that we play. So those are the main things. I mean, it doesn't look like very much, but it takes us quite a lot of time to get through it all. Which brings me to, where do we find our tracks for Hugh's show? Lots of places. So, this isn't quite going as I thought it would. Blogs and tastemakers, massive, massive source. So in the sort of music industry ecosystem, I think blogs and generally people who talk about music on the internet, massive, massive important part of it all, because they can take bigger risks, because there's unlimited space on the internet. You can talk about loads and loads of different tracks. Some of them might work, some of them might not, but no one's going to judge you for it. But it means that we've got lots of music at our fingertips that has been already sort of filtered by someone. Someone is talking about this, and it they appreciate it. So it's sort of a filter for us, and it's a major source of our music. Other DJs and shows, I'm very lucky that I work with some of the best DJ talent in the country. They all know their stuff. They all bring it to us. We love that. That's how we discovered people like Protégé. Todd Latty actually came straight to us and said, you've got to play this guy, he's amazing. And we ended up getting him in for a piano session, so it was definitely worth it. BBC Introducing, as I said, we get a lot of our music through there. Friends and industry contacts, so managers, A&Rs, people that we just know often come to us with new things that they're signing, which is a really good way of finding stuff. Festivals and live gigs, obviously. And then finally, radio pluggers, which kind of whizzed away there, but I'm going to say radio pluggers last, because I think there's a common misconception that you have to have a plugger to get played on the radio and that we get all our music from pluggers. So a question that often comes up, do you need a plugger to get played on the radio? I would say at this stage, getting played on a specialist music show, no. Sam's going to kill me in a minute. This is a screenshot from my inbox when I was away for a couple of days. I'm not looking for sympathy, maybe a bit of understanding. I'm not a good person in terms of inbox zero. I've got a colleague who can do it. I can't. In that lot is, important emails from management and, missives from my mum and stuff. So I can't possibly listen to everything I get sent because I get sent a hell of a lot. So for me, it's about prioritising, getting to know people, trusting my sources, just like the audience choose who they trust for the sources for new music themselves. So I'd say if you're going to get a plugger, which is definitely worth it, Sam, I'm not doing it out of a job, definitely worth it higher up the sort of chain, you want to go for a good one. And good pluggers have good relationships with programs and they know what we go for, so they don't waste our time by just plugging us stuff that they've been paid to plug. If you're paying someone to send me an email, that is a waste of money. I'm not afraid to say that because BBC Introducing is there to help you get through the system without having a plugger to get to our ears, basically. But if you're going to have a plugger, get a good one who knows the programs that they're pitching to, one that's really organised and can give us all the information and make the tracks easy to access. They're also really good for knowing when the time is right to go for the next stage, so plays on bigger shows or go for playlist, and they can put a really good argument together, which helps me then pitch in playlist to get those tracks further up, and they don't spam. So if you want tips on what makes a great radio producer, see Sam after. I'm sure you've got something to say about that now. But that's what I'd say about pluggers. But basically, the main thing is if you're a new artist and you're just starting out, take all of the resource and money that you maybe spend on a plugger right at the very beginning and invest it in writing good songs, doing loads of gigs, building up a fan base, and maybe getting some attention from those sort of bloggers and tastemakers sort of at the sort of beginning of the music industry ecosystem. And then we will find you and we will play you. So we're going to move on to the Radio 1 Playlist Committee, because this is the other part of my job. This is an old list. We now have 3 lists, ABC, and the BBC Introducing list. The BBC Introducing list is decided by another committee, and that's informed by what we play on Hugh's show, as well as lots of other things. But we decide the A, B, and C list. It's made up of music team and a few show producers and assistant producers, but anyone in that team can bring up a track for discussion if they feel like it warrants discussion. So what do we look for on playlist? Well, it's slightly different and slightly more complicated, obviously, than what we look for when we play stuff on Hugh's show, because we can take more risks. First of all, though, this looks quite similar. Is it a great song or a great artist? Obviously, for radio producers, our main goal is to engage our audience, and we don't want them switching off because we might not get them back. So will it make people switch off is a big thing. Also, how will it fit in with what we've got on the rest of Radio 1 in the playlist? Are our genres balanced? That kind of thing. Obviously, we're looking for quality, but for Radio 1, I think this is quite different from what you'll get on a commercial station, for instance. Distinctiveness is a massive thing for us because we need to differentiate ourselves from commercial stations. So we are looking for things that make us different. So that's reflected in our playlist as well. Will it bring the artist and us any new fans? So is it a band that have got a massive fan base who, if we add them to the playlist, are they going to really appreciate us for that? Or likewise, is it a new artist that we really believe in, and are we going to bring them, massive new fan base by playing them on daytime Radio 1? We've got to think about whether they are Radio 1 regular. If like Katy Perry's new single, that didn't really have to have a lot of argument to go on the playlist. It was kind of a given. Sometimes there's one-hit wonders that are just doing amazing things, and our audience are clamouring to hear them. We add them, and then sometimes we champion new artists, so they fit into different categories. Very rarely we have an editorial consideration that means we can't add something, language or something like that, but that's pretty rare. Also important, relevance to our audience. So this comes into pop more than anything. Of course, we all know it's not just about the music itself in that genre. Are they a Yas or a Who, as Scott would say? For pop, it's not about just the music. It's about the image. It's about the ubiquity. So we've got to consider that when we're thinking about adding those big pop artists or pop artists to come. Also, we do look for evidence of growing fan base. This is particularly important with new artists. I mean, passion is part of it from our perspective, but we also need to be able to show the rest of the team that this is a goer, that it's not just going to be, sort of die a death. So this is where passion comes in. Passion is actually a massive thing for us, especially for me, because I represent kind of BBC Introducing a new artist on the playlist team. So I kind of feel like a plugger in a lot of ways, going into those meetings and pitching for records that we're really passionate about on Specialist to get added to the playlist. So these things are all very important plays from Radio 1 Specialist DJs. They do get talked about in playlist meetings. And One Extra, likewise BBC Introducing, because obviously we all love a good BBC story that we can say, look, we've supported this artist all the way through. Is the artist ready? This is really important because we don't want to add somebody before they're ready for it, because being put on Daytime Radio 1, you're in a massive spotlight and it's a huge pressure. So we don't want to add somebody until we know that they've got more songs in the canon ready to go. We don't want to blow it for them because it's hard to come back from that. So you've got to think about that too. And the one that everybody always talks about, do we look at all the stats that everybody talks about? I think, well, it depends. If you've got an argument together and you've got a killer stat, you're going to use that because it's going to back up your argument. But I'd say this is true. It's very rarely the whole story. I was just thinking, where did we add something that was purely stats? And the last thing I think of is that Oh Me Cheerleader song, because no one was really playing it on Radio 1. Everybody hated it. But it was doing amazingly well in the charts, and obviously our audience were clamouring to hear it. So we had to add it because it was going to be a massive, massive hit. So that's kind of the last time that I remember that happening. But they do help for comparing artists in the same lane, for instance, or to see whether that fan base that we're talking about is actually out there. And it depends on the genre, obviously. But ultimately, Radio 1 Playlist is all about balance. So we've got to be able to, obviously we've got a job to help break artists, especially UK ones, but we wouldn't get people to listen to those unless we played the Katy Perrys and the Little Mixes of this world, because otherwise we'd be too niche. So it's all about balancing out, and here's a few artists that we've supported, like the Amazons, Christine and the Queens, Rag and Bone Man, we playlisted him way back last year, Chance the Rapper. But then, you've got them sitting alongside your Zara Larsons and your Stormzy's and your Katy Perrys, because that's what keeps people listening. So that's kind of what it's all about. If anyone has any questions, please fire them at me.